Hello, everybody. Welcome to Watches with Dennis, and back with a typical Saturday live stream. And I think much like last week, I went ahead and decided rather than talking about some new releases, I wanted to go ahead and do a more evergreen topic again. And this time, my interest was driven by an article that I saw with a blog to watch. It was written by David Bredan Brendan, I should say. And he kind of talked about his annoyance with watches, movements, and their terrible accuracy, and our acceptance of that, even when we are spending hundreds of dollars on something. So I thought that would be a fun topic for us to go ahead and tackle today. So that'll be the subject. Don't know that we'll actually go the entire episode, so to speak, but nonetheless, I think it will be something that hopefully will drive some discussion with those who are watching live. And of course, if you're watching the recording, feel free to leave your comments on the video and I will review those afterward. So housekeeping items, no pre-recorded videos over the last week, so nothing to update you regarding that. Again, in the video description, there will be a link to the article that is going to drive this particular topic. Likewise, we will, I should say, not we, because I've already looked at it. You guys can see the link to the Discord that I have if you like to chat about watches through that. And likewise, the 99 Cent Club, there's a link to supporting the channel that way if you are so interested. On the list today is, yes, my Glashütte, let me pronounce that properly as best I can, Glashütte Original 60s. So this is a model that I've looked at from time to time. I've never really talked about it very much. Actually, because it's so hard to get the webcam to zoom, I'll put one. Here's an actual photo I took of it yesterday that better shows it off. So a lot of people have probably seen this or seen this style of font. There are a number of watches that have numerals like this. I think there's some Marlins, for example, from Timex that do so, and there are a few others. Someone had mentioned that there's a Vostok that very much looks like this watch. So there are some other options besides the Geo version of it. This watch is currently in the vintage line where the 70s models are. And but this one's actually, I believe, from 2010, or at least it was sold in 2010. So on the back of it, it's actually branded as a Senator. So it turns out I did keep my word about having an interest in buying a Glashütte Senator series watch. It just wasn't the main ones I was looking at. So technically it was a Senator. They probably moved it over to the vintage side because the dial is very much from one of the 60s versions that Geo's sort of predecessor, when it was an East German company, ended up making. The numerals are very much the same. The watch is bigger now. This is a 39 millimeter watch. Back then it was 36. I'll probably have a review up in about a week or so. The strangest thing about it, and of course I saw the photos ahead of time, is the movement. The movement is too small for the case. And that's not unusual with a lot of dress watches. I think the Parmigiani, I got rid of one of my Parmigianis, my Parmigiani Tonda, was able to trade it at the same trade value as I bought it for. So other than losing the sales tax, I was like, okay, I was thinking about letting it go. But at that point, I didn't have to kick in too much more money to go ahead and get this. But this, the way they've configured it, they have a domed sapphire on the back. And, when I do the video, you'll get a better look at it. But so you even see the stem. It is the weirdest decision I have ever seen with a movement. And I mean, there's the movement finishing's decent for the, Geo does a pretty good job on movement finishing. You're not going to see like the hand engraved balance cock that you're going to see on some of the like panel line and stuff. This doesn't seem to have that, but there's, they have some, black polished screw heads and such. But anyway, it was one of the little weird things, but I've wanted a rose gold with black dial for a while. I've been looking at some JLCs and some Chopards, but I also wanted to get back into the Geo because I did have a Pano, but I didn't even own it for a year because when I decided I was going to get the Longa one, I went ahead and traded it. So anyway, so that's my new news, and I should have a video probably in the next week, if not the week after that, doing a more comprehensive review on it. Everything seems pretty good with it. Accuracy was a little iffy when I got it. I demagnetized it, and that seemed to solve the problem. So something may have happened to it during shipping. It's pretty easy to magnetize watches. So let me greet the chat, and then we will get into the topics. Good morning, Kevin. Welcome to the live stream. Thomas with the Escapement Show. Unfortunately, I was not able to catch your episode this morning. So I sit on call. I work in public health. I sit on call. We have a 24/7 hotline it's really an after hours line, but the number works 24/7. But for public health emergencies. And I apparently am on call. I didn't have it on my calendar, but apparently I'm on call this week. So at 4 a.m., I got a call because there was a bat. And people, if they wake up with bats, there's a rabies concern. So anyway, I like to call those individuals back because people get really scared with it when it comes to rabies. And so, but it's hard to go back to sleep after you're up that early. So I did fall back asleep, but it was when your show was on. So I apologize. Koji, thank you for being a club member. Congratulations on the new Glasuta Original. Really cool piece. Thank you. Joel Bolt, your Geo took me by surprise. Nice pickup. Love the strap too. Strap is alligator, but you'll see from the image, it's small scale, not large scale. I've never had a small scale alligator strap, but I assume they do it because it adds to that vintage charm. The back of it is calf leather is how they back it, I assume, for comfort. But anyway, just one of those things. So mentioned that the Geo is not the topic of today's episode, though it could be if the movement out of the box was really, really bad. But what I wanted to do is, you see on that, my headline is, should there be a minimum accuracy level to modern watches? Is kind of, I named it more elegantly, but that's the query I have for you all today. And I'm curious what your opinion is, because I really do feel like I see both sides to it. And I do lean towards, my initial answer would be, I do lean towards that there should probably be a minimum standard, and it should be higher than what we see out of certain watches. And I do think we've grown very, and grown is a weird word. I mean, grown as a people, because, like, I haven't been in the watch collecting hobby like all that long. I really got started around the start of the pandemic, but the thing that was interesting to me was the just how inaccurate so many of the movement branding is at this point. And I understand it from a manufacturing perspective. You don't want to constantly be warranting servicing all of these watches that people are whining about because they're not giving you cost accuracy. But on the flip side, they've given such broad ranges in many instances that it's like, with all our advancement, all our technology, all our ability to micro-produce things, I mean, nanotechnologies and all the rest of it. And I know those aren't all involved in watches, but my point is, we do small stuff really good now. And when you consider that back in the past, pocket watches could have very impressive levels of accuracy, and this was hundreds of years ago, with our industrial manufacturing capabilities, why is it such a struggle to consistently, on relatively affordable watches, go ahead and achieve similar? And the answer is, it is possible. We know it is. We see plenty of micro brands and stuff regulate to these levels. But that was the driving point to David's article. And I do have a link in the video description, because I'm not going to read the article to you. It's actually quite long. But his so he has a complaining series, a grinding gear series over at A Blog to Watch. And so the driving factor to this was the new Casio, the Casio Edifice, the first Casio mechanical watch. And they ended up dropping in, as you can see from the headline, that minus 35 to plus 45, essentially an NH35 movement, is dropped into those new Casios, the first mechanical watch Casio ever did. And Casio, with its name built in the watch community on the G-Shock line in particular, quartz watches, very accurate, atomic clock syncing and all the rest of it, to go with the most ho-hum, couldn't care less movement accuracy option, I think, well, frankly, pissed him off. And so he tore into this giant rant. And I think it's very interesting because, in addition to his perspective, which goes on and on and on, you can see there are comments at the end where some are siding with him and others are like, this is not a big deal. And so I'm sure not everyone is in agreement that we need to have things more accurate than this. But and it's all over the board. The arguments were from, like, Seiko really got brought up a lot because Seiko makes the movement that the Casio uses, and that just sort of got to be the touchstone. And we all know that Seiko, be it a 4R, a 6R, or an 8 series movement, like, those accuracy on the 10 advertised levels are not very impressive compared to what we see compared to cost. We'll just compare it to cost. But it's not limited to Seiko. But what my point was going to be that with Seiko, there are Seiko apologists who are like, well, you can regulate it yourself better. You can improve it if it comes out of the gate at minus 30, for example, or plus 30. It's within spec. Seiko won't work on it, but it's not hard to open the case back and adjust this. And David's pushback on this is, but why should we have to? Like, why? We're paying a few $100s. It's a lot of money for a lot of people. Like, if you're not a watch collector, you're going to spend $500 on a watch. I mean, it's a lot. I don't spend $500 on shoes, for example. Even my dress shoes aren't that much. I like watch money is different. And so it's like, why do we, is it the accuracy? Yeah, we're mostly buying them for aesthetics, but does that mean we just don't care about accuracy anymore? It wasn't the whole point of a mechanical watch to be accurate. So he really dives in on that. And so before prepping that, or while prepping this live stream, I went ahead and I pulled up some of the calibers that are used today in watches to bring this to home, bring this up to point. So like the NH35 or NH35A. So again, kind of the poster child example. Minus 20 to plus 40 seconds per day. Watch is used in a lot of different watches. A number of Invictas will rely. And what I like about Caliber Corners, they had some summaries that people had submitted to a variety of things. So Lumetech, and Invicta, like they're known, Protex, they're known to use these particular movements. So that's one example. But it's not just Japanese brands. So I wanted to bring up the SW200 as an example, because again, it depends on the grade you get. But the Sellita SW200, in this case, the 200-1, if you're going with the base standard grade, they adjust it in 2 positions, plus or minus 12 seconds a day to plus or minus 30. So that's practically as bad as the NH35 is. And so it being Swiss labeled doesn't mean any, like this is a problem. If you want to view it as a problem, this is a problem that is industry wide and is not specific to one particular brand. Because of the Casio discussion, David's article ends up being a debate about what Seiko does. And a lot of people rightly do point out that the Seiko movements tend to be much better than what their advertising spec is. I can say when I had a Pro Spec Seiko, my mechanical accuracy out of it was better than what I had out of my Orient, which I think was my third example here. I think I had the F6922 in my watch. It may have been a different version, but they're all just about the same. Now, Seiko owns Orient, but Orient uses its own movements that it had prior developed. But again, the accuracy is not particularly good, minus 15 to plus 25 seconds per day. Tighter than the 4R line, but I can tell you my overall accuracy out of the box on my Orient was worse, still within spec, but was worse than what I had out of my Seiko. But the bottom line is they're both still saying this thing is going to gain or lose potentially over a minute a week, maybe multiple minutes, which is, of course, concerning. And then another Japanese brand, but not at all associated with Seiko. Let's look over at Citizen, the Miyota line. So we know a lot of micro brands use the 8000 or the 9000 series. I went ahead and grabbed the 8000 because it is the inferior series. The 8215 is my example here. And again, accuracy, minus 20 to plus 40 seconds per day. So, and they measure that just within the first hour of a full power reserve to promise that level of accuracy. So the point is, like, regardless of what he focused on Casio or Seiko, because Seiko, provides the movements, I do think it is a fair thing to say, if you want to talk about like double-digit inaccuracy on movements, it's all over the board. It's with the Swiss, it's with the Japanese. I almost put in a Seagull movement because there were plenty. I didn't want to use. It was hard to get a lot of good specs on it, and I didn't want another 2824 clone, but Seagull makes one and it's inaccurate too. And I'm sure there's some of the ETAs that are also pretty bad in spec, but at this point I figured I gave you enough examples of kind of where my brain was going with this. So that's why I wanted to kind of ground it as a discussion. What do you all think in terms of, is it a big deal? Is it not? Is it a fair price? Should we expect more out of the manufacturing? Because the thing that comes up, and David kind of touched on this on the Blog to Watch weekly podcast that I don't remember when. Obviously, it came out after the article. I only just listened to it yesterday, but he did discuss some of the feedback that he got on the article, because there's almost 100 comments on that article that he wrote at the end of July, and one of the aspects was that, yes, you can regulate them. And most of the panel was in agreement. Like, well, we'll use the Seiko example because that was the example. You can regulate it, but like it has the ability to regulate. You can make it tighter. It takes someone intervening, and they're choosing not to have a person intervene and do it. And so they're doing it based off of the machine spec. His counterpoint to that is, well, the System 51 from Swatch is like a out of range. So I don't remember what it is, like a -10 to +15 seconds per day currently. And that's an entirely machine assembled movement. So why can Swatch in their cheaper watches give you a more accurate, or I should say more tight tolerance with their machine, no human touches it movement, but Seiko can't? And Seiko's making more money than Swatch is because they're selling their watches for more. So that's kind of where that discussion has gone. But anyway, I was curious what you folks would think. Let me catch up with chat. There's not much to catch up with currently, but and then we can go on a little bit more while you guys get a chance to comment. So Thomas says, this is back in my intro discussion about the rabies call I had. Wow, that's what happens when the bat signal appears, I guess. We are in, I think we're still in, I'm not a rabies expert. I'm the one who was stuck on the call log today. I think we're still in roosting season here in Kansas. So bats are trying to find a place to roost. And so they tend to get into chimneys that aren't covered. That's like one of the number one ways they get in. So like I have a little screen over my chimney cap. And so that if they fly in and the flute's open, they could get in through the flute and then get into your house. Or if there's like a hole in the attic, a hole in the wall, you go outside and you can look for holes. They don't like to come in on the ground like how mice get in. Mice can get into all sorts of places. I get mice, I probably catch one, I don't know, once a quarter or once a half year or something, getting into the basement because they'll find a way to squeeze in. And bats are about the same size. But anyway, not much to do with watches other than I looked at my watch when the phone call came in and it was 4:15 a.m. So anyway, but parents, it involved a kid. So parents get really scared about that stuff. So I do like to call them back to just give them next steps and not make them wait. Jonathan, welcome to the live stream. Disagree with the author. I'll go ahead and pop that back up here so people can kind of see part of the piece. There's the edifice that was the target of his ire. Disagree with the author, considering Swiss movements are often plus or minus 20 seconds out the shelf. How much better is that compared to the Japanese movements? Not much would be my answer, but I also I'd have to read the article again. I did read it, but I would need to reread it. I don't think he's saying that the Swiss are better. I think it's this watch, this one that you see on the screen, triggered him, but his argument was no brand should be selling a watch that is going to be, I don't know if he gave a specific, I'm going to say plus or minus 2 minutes. If a watch is going to lose 2 minutes or gain 2 minutes a week, even though it's mechanical, in this day and age, with our machining ability, we should be able to essentially automate the tolerance to be better. That the way he, as I recall, phrased it was, nothing out of the box should be worse than a System 51. That's modern. That's currently produced. The System 51 from Swatch should be like the bare minimum on accuracy that you should be able to expect. I would add qualifiers personally. I don't agree with that entirely. For example, if you're doing something cutting edge with a watch, and by cutting edge, what I'll mean is something that makes the mechanics of it difficult. Thinness would be the primary. I have historically been a lot more tolerant, for example, of dress watches not being, say, to COSC standard. That was something that confused me when I first got into watches. I would see dress watches like the Reverso, for example, and they're not advertising it as at COSC standard. And in fact, the watch probably, in some instances, is not in the COSC standard. And at first, I thought maybe they just weren't getting it certified. But I think because of the size of the movement, it's just harder. And then you start thinking about some of the really thin stuff that we would see out of like Piaget or out of Bulgari. Again, when you're doing those sort of things, you go super ultra thin. Ming did a watch recently, which was really light and really thin. Like I could understand in those instances. And it used to be like in the 50s and 60s, you'd see a lot of those ladies bracelet watches. I don't know if you've all ever, excuse me, I need to take a drink. If you've ever handled any, I worked on a few during the pandemic. I would take watches apart. So I'd buy broken ones off of eBay. And some of the first ones I bought were like a set of just ladies' watches, just real thin, like the movements were the size of a dime. Again, from like the 50s. But, on paper, their accuracy was terrible because they were so small. So again, his comparison to hundreds of years ago. Well, we didn't have wristwatches hundreds of years ago, but somewhere in this article, he mentions how hundreds of years ago we were able to have like a 4-second a day accuracy pocket watch. Well, pocket watches are bigger, so it's easier to get at that. But we know we can have super accurate watches. Rolex does it all the time. Omega does it all the time. Why do they have to be multi-thousands of dollars? We can, we can automate the manufacture of the movements. We do. We automate their assembly. So why we're not asking for plus minus 2 seconds a day. He's not. He's just asking for that. You shouldn't be able to say that at the end of the same week. This is what he's coming at is you should not be able to say at the end of the week that a watch was 5 minutes off and that was okay. That didn't mean it needed to be serviced. That's what his trigger is. But he used this one as a particular example. But as I've shown you, like with like these Sellita great, like if it's plus 30 seconds a day, Sellita, this is not a Japanese movement issue. This sort of thing is not, that's not, so it's, let's say it's 25 seconds a day. And it's just like, so you're adding minutes. And I get it. Like they fully acknowledge the same truth as I noted is here with the 4R or the NH35 or any movement, most any movement, not the System 51, but most any movement is they obviously can be regulated to be much better. But it begs the question why we don't demand it. So that's why I just thought it would be an interesting discussion point is why we as a collective community don't demand it. And again, some people just don't care. That's part of the statements that were down in this here's a picture of the System 51 if you're curious, the machine assembled swatch movement, is that it's the aesthetics. Like people are buying them because they like how they look. They're buying them to be jewelry. They're buying them for whatever. But for David, his perspective, and this is where I agree with him. This is fun. I expect my watches to be functional. If I wanted to wear stuff that wasn't functional on my wrist for aesthetic reasons, I would wear bracelets, and I do not. I don't like bracelets. I don't wear rings either. Like those are things that are looks for the sake of looks alone. If it says it's a watch, it best be able to tell the time. If you want to wear it and not set it and just wear it as jewelry, more power to you. But I do expect a functionality to it, just like I would expect an attractive car to still be able to perform like a reasonable car would. So that's where I think he has a point. I do think it fell too far, though, and getting back to Jonathan's point in our live stream chat, I do think it ended up getting focused way too much because his ire was directed at the Casio edifice on Seiko, and and he better acknowledge this in general. It's just normally, and his other grind gears usually don't target brands, but he was just really miffed about the Casio thing. And so it ended up coming across as a complaint about Seiko. Now, Seiko, we could expand the discussion and say in Seiko's instance, you see this approach, this philosophy kind of manifesting throughout their catalog beyond the movements. We could start talking about misaligned chapter rings that weren't always a problem, according to longtime collectors. The bezels that don't line up exactly right, just the lack of human care because it's mass produced. And maybe that's okay. Like it's up to each of us if it's okay or it's not. But Seiko has a lot of stuff going on. Like the clasps aren't good, the bracelets aren't good. And you move up into the multi-thousands, the parameters change. But the point being, $500 is a lot of money. My point being, $500 is a lot of money. So why is that so allowed when you think about the quality you would get with something else like a phone for $500? That's where I think the question gets begged, or at least where I think it's interesting to have the conversation about. Joe Bolt says, for me, creativity and aesthetic design reign far supreme over accuracy. Strap and comfort also probably a higher priority. Accuracy is a bonus or a tie-breaking factor. It's a good point. And sort of in that vein, Joel, me as a case in point, when my Orient's accuracy disappointed me, I popped the back off and I regulated it myself. I did the same thing with the Vostok I owned. which I almost threw the caliber corner didn't have any. It probably did. It probably was spelled differently. I couldn't find a good example with but I swear my Vostok, my hand wide Komorderski, had an up to like plus 60 seconds a day. And mine wasn't, again, mine was within spec, but I think it was like gaining 40 seconds a day. It was terrible. Absolutely terrible. It was the first watch I ever regulated. I have a video of how I did it, which probably not the safest way to do it with the toothpick. But hey, it was a learning experience, and the watch was cheap enough I wasn't going to lose any sleep over it. But that's the thing with the Vostok. That was a watch that's under $100. When we're talking like dime store, drug store purchase price watches, maybe the expectations are different. I still wanted a reasonably accurate watch. I was just willing to risk destroying it to try and do it myself as a learning experience. And I had more experience by the time I did the Orient. I would be comfortable enough opening up a Seiko to try and do a Seiko. But I also sympathize with the idea that other people don't want to do it. But some of the points in the comments that were on the article were you could go in and take a watch to a shop and have it regulated. So some people are like, no, the company should do it. And other people are like, it's $20. Why don't you just go to a watchmaker? If you're uncomfortable doing it, why don't you just go in and pay a little bit more money and get it as accurate as you would like? That the accuracy will hold. These movements they can be well regulated in most instances. Most of the modern movements can be well regulated. So very interesting sort of thing. But others are, in different boats where they're just like, yeah, like here's an example where someone said they're avoiding this. And I've had people in this who watch this channel in the live streams have mentioned like they don't buy Seikos anymore. They don't buy Seiko movements anymore. Like they only want particular things. I know some people that won't buy the Sleeta SW200. Maybe that's not driven by accuracy. Maybe it's driven by the fact that they don't like the hand wind risk to that particular movement. But they'll be okay with a Sleeta 3 SW300. Just like I know some people that they don't tell me. I don't know a lot about the Miyota 8000 series. I know a lot of people who respect the Miyota 9000 series. And then we know a lot of micro brands will take movements like the Miyota line and they're regulating them themselves. So when we buy the movement through that manufacturer, we feel okay because the accuracy is reasonable. So again, some of it's a brand decision. But again, you could go with David's approach and say, well, do we want to expect the movement manufacturer to get it that right out of the box? That's tough to say because, again, if you think about COSC certification, they certify the movements decased. What happens once they're cased and the hands are applied? Like, there's things that will affect that accuracy. It's reasonable that you would have a COSC certified watch that's not in COSC spec once it's cased up. It's possible. It would be possible to see it. So, movement accuracy is not my primary motivator either, Joel. I guess kind of my point, but I thought it was still an interesting discussion because it's like, I do assume a certain level, like with this watch, if this is not within COSC, I was in no way, and granted it's used, so I have to factor that in. I don't expect it to be in COSC. It was never advertised to be in COSC. If it goes in for service, I don't expect it to come back -4 to +6. But if it was averaging +20, I'd be pissed. And I would I would think it would need service. If it came back after service at +20 or came new in box plus or minus 20, I would be pissed off. I do think that's ridiculous for pretty much any normal sized watch in this day and age, especially if I paid a lot of money. But that is also a factor, is it not? If we're paying luxury money, we would have a higher standard versus a Seiko 5. Like if you're spending a couple $100, my standards go down. They do because you get what you pay for. David's argument here is this sort of like -35 +45, that shouldn't be at any level that we pay for. That we should have evolved beyond this by our sheer manufacturing capability. We should accidentally just be higher than this at this stage because of all our fine micron machinery. That he doesn't see the excuse, the manufacturing excuse. It's laziness that he thinks drives it. Oh, unwillingness to do better. Seiko honestly could probably, in Seiko's case, get away with advertising the NH35 in the 4R series, probably with half the variants that they currently do. And I don't think they'd see a huge surge in returns on warranty because their movements do tend to be that much more accurate from the feedback I've received and the ones I've owned. But they don't. And here we are. Koji says, I don't have an accuracy fetish either. In response to Joe Bolt, you obviously have always quartz or spring drive as an option. Sure. But spring drive ain't all that accurate either, for that matter. When you think about it, I like spring drive. I think it's neat. It gets you basically cheap quartz accuracy. So I would never recommend spring drive if accuracy is your motivator. I think the best spring drive I've seen is like plus or minus 10 seconds a month. If you want accuracy, you need to go more pure quartz. You just need to. Maybe they can get spring drive more accurate. I bet they can eventually. But it'll never match quartz. So it's just, if accuracy is your primary goal, I'm going to say skip over spring drive. It's just not good enough. You need to go straight quartz if you want that. Get a high accuracy quartz piece, and then see some serious performance. Good morning, Trap Vision. Welcome to the live stream. Coach said, I do expect a Geneva Seal watch to not only be aesthetically attractive and well finished, but accurate, even in a dress watch. However, I don't know what all applies on the Geneva Seal standard, but we so rarely see it anymore that I do know there's an aesthetic level. There's also requirements on the materials, like I believe they're not allowing silicone balances. I don't think they allow silicone in the watch at all. Which might not actually speak to an accuracy standpoint, because there's magnetism protection involving silicone, but it does speak to an aesthetic standpoint, arguably. But I think it's reasonable to expect something. I'm going to air quote, something out of particular seals. But the Geneva Seal, I mean, who uses it except Vacheron and occasionally Chopard? I don't know of any other brands that are using the Geneva Seal. Patek dropped it. I didn't know why. I assumed it was because Patek wanted to start using silicone, but I've also heard, I think it was over with Watch Art Psy, that Patek got mad that Vacheron got to have not Vacheron, another brand got to be Geneva sealed at some point, and it upset Patek, and so Patek decided to make their own seal. But that's another rabbit hole that I don't think maybe it's interesting to go down. I don't think most of the audience really cares what Patek does, because I don't think most of the audience buys Patek. But it was always a squirrely thing when I heard it explained over on that YouTube channel. Trap Vision says, for some experiencing an AliExpress watch, brand watch powered by an NH movement running under 10 seconds, plus or minus, companies like Seiko are expected to perform better. I mean, I think that's a good point, Trap, because they do advertise such a broad range. Again, the NH35 here, and we're talking, where was it? 20 to 40 was what said here, I think. Yeah. So 20 to 40 seconds per day. And then you think about in their same corporate portfolio, Orient, 15 to 25. And that always stood out to me when I was first looking at watches from the brands. And I was comparing some Orient models to some Seiko models that were around the same price point. And I was like, why are all these 4Rs? Because 4Rs, similar, basically same architecture as the NH35. Why are they the Seiko ones, which actually tended to run more money? Why is the accuracy range so much worse than the Orients are, which were cheaper watches? And again, in my limited experience, I've only owned one Orient. In my limited experience, well, all my watches have always been within the accuracy spec of the movement from Orient and my multiple Seikos. The Seikos were more accurate, just flat out more accurate than my Orient was. All of them have been. But it was very odd to me that they advertised it that way. So I could definitely see it, because, again, with whatever the AliExpress brands that Trap Vision has sort of referenced are using, be they Seagulls or other Chinese manufactured movements, there's a lot that just isn't this, that's better than this. I mean, in fact, I think this is my worst example I pulled up. I'm granted I only gave you 4, but here, 12 to 30. I was a little confused by this. Accuracy of plus or minus 12 seconds a day up to plus or minus 30. So are they saying it won't be any better than plus or minus 12? Or does that just mean the plus or minus 12 is in the two adjusted positions and the other positions could be as bad as 30? I'm going to guess the latter, because this is very strangely phrased. But your overall average on this watch could be up over 20 seconds per day, given that, because there's 6 positions that you would consider on a watch existing: dial up, dial down, 3, 6, 9, and 12 up. Those are your standard 6. But so again, the minus 15 to plus 25 on the Orient, the Miyota 8215 was minus 20 to plus 40. So that was very similar to, actually, it was the same as the NH. So there, we did it. We had one match, and then I already told you about the Seiko. So, or excuse me, the Sellita. So, I don't know. It's one of those, because you guys, Koji and Joe Bolt bring up good points about it. There's other routes too with accuracy, and David knows that. There are other routes for accuracy. In fact, welcome to live stream, Hannibal. Hannibal says a very good bottom line. If accuracy is important to you, buy quartz in particular. Citizen, the Citizen, plus or minus 5 seconds per year. Don't they have a really expensive model that's like plus or minus 1 second a year? You can get plus or minus 10 seconds a year from the Grand Seiko high accuracy quartz models. So yes, I mean, fundamentally, if accuracy is your primary concern, quartz is objectively the right answer. Absolutely, it is the right answer to buy. Now you can get so like the plus or minus 2 seconds per day, 2 to plus or minus 5 seconds per day. If you like the romanticism, I get where David's coming from too, though. If you like the romanticism of the mechanical movement, we're not going to say, like, he doesn't want us to be saying accuracy doesn't matter anymore, because it mattered all throughout the history of the mechanical watch. Why are we not striving for it anymore? Just because it's archaic technology doesn't mean it can't be well-performing archaic technology. And in the case of, like, bringing back up when Koji mentioned spring drive, there are there are mechanical movements that are more accurate than spring drive. So we have the ability. Now, those are expensive watches or tuned for trial or all the rest of it. Person intervention on almost all of these modern movements can make them better than whatever they're advertised out of the 10 spec is also. So again, it could be this, what Hannibal noted. If you really care and you just want it out of the box to be as accurate as possible, quartz is going to be your right answer. And we could currently say, if you want it to be mechanical, then you need to get it certified, get a COSC. If you want it that way out of the box, get something COSC or Metis. Or if you're okay doing what a lot of people in the comment section of the article on the screen mentioned, you can take it to a watchmaker and regulate it yourself, or you can do it yourself. These are all like lever adjusted. They're not, these movements that are in these bad of ranges they're not got the little weights on the balance where you need a watchmaker to mess with it, or else you're going to ruin everything. These are pretty easy for a basic person to do. You take a pair of tweezers, and once you get the case on, you can buy a case decasing kit for less than $20. In fact, I think they're around $10 on Amazon. So being able to do that they are all options that do exist, and they're not particularly hard. So yeah, I'm all over the place on this. I hate being wishy-washy, but I guess I kind of am. Hagfish is greeting hello and greets the chat, and then follows up with a question: why are Seiko movements so bad, Dennis? Even the 6R55, which is like the rival of the ETA 2892 A2, is still so bad in accuracy. What I think, my opinion, is Seiko deliberately gives a broad range, and I'm talking Seiko in particular. Seiko gives a broad range because they want to keep warranty claims down on minor accuracy issues. So they give a broad range so that when the watch is tested, and it's often well within that range, people don't have any claim to send it in, and they'll be able to just point and say, calm down, it's within spec. And in a lot of instances, it's going to be well within spec is sort of the thought. So again, I don't know anything about the 2892 in terms of what its standard accuracy, because with ETA and Sellita, again, like the example, and I'll pull the Sellita back up again. Like, they come in grades. So I assume that there's like a bad version of the 2892. In fact, I guess we could try and find it here on this site. I'm going to assume ETA is so popular that hopefully it will pop up, but it's a little bit of a slow site. So apologies for why I preloaded all of this, but I'm not sure what the advertising out of the 10 2892 accuracies are. So we might as well just take a look and see what this site has listed. So in terms of accuracy, there's usually an accuracy section. Right. So it can range from as much as plus or minus 20 seconds per day to just plus or minus 5 seconds a day, or within COSC. So that has to do with the grades. So they do their COSC grade, and then there's the top grade, which is that, to plus or minus 15, which is still pretty good, I think. And then the elaborated grade. So that's the one that could be up to the plus or minus 20 seconds per day. So it depends. So the 2892 does have a relatively inaccurate, when you think about it, if it was right at the end of spec. So 20 seconds a day would still be in spec. It's an extreme case scenario, right? So that's every 3 days it gains a minute. So you're gaining over 2 minutes a week on it. Do you care? Is that bad enough? I would rather, for me, 15 seconds is kind of, I think the System 51 goal of plus 15 a day is kind of my upper end of tolerance on my expectations on a watch. But again, it just depends. 2 minutes doesn't seem totally absurd. When it's 30 seconds a day, it's gaining a minute a day. Maybe that would be my threshold. I'd be like, that's pretty shabby at that point. Pretty shabby. But anyway, I think that's part of it. I think that's Seiko they're trying to make sure that they're not going to get a whole bunch of complaints. So I think they keep it broad on purpose, not that they actually expect to run that poorly. But Hannibal does confirm the Citizen 0100 is the plus or minus 1 second per year. Very, very cool movement. I do have one of the plus or minus 5 seconds. I have one of their the Citizen line watches, and it does fall out. They do note, Citizen does note that if it goes into hibernation mode, you may lose your plus or minus 5 seconds a year, or month, or whatever the rule is. A year is per year. However, I found I do let mine hibernate. It still stays pretty accurate. They're very good. They're very, very good. Koji says Grand Seiko has a new spring drive movement that's accurate to plus or minus 20 seconds per year. Not too shabby. No, I wasn't aware of that one. So that would be very, very nice. Hannibal asks, what site do you use to set your watches? Oh, you mean like when I like to sync them to a clock? I just use whatever's on my Windows desktop. So I just wait. And I don't sync much anymore. Like click right on. I did it with this watch yesterday simply because I was trying to make sure it wasn't. I'd already put it on a time grapher, so I knew it was where its accuracy was. But I had misset it earlier in the day when I was in a hurry when I got the watch out of the box because it just arrived yesterday. So I went ahead and I usually, because my computer is supposed to be syncing against the atomic clock daily. So I just this computer is running Windows 7 still. So I just look at the little thing. I'll load it up and then I'll push the crown in. I'm doing the stopwatch feature, but this is me pushing the crown. Push the crown in, and that's how I do it. And as long as the movement hacks, I'll have already centered it the minute before, and I do it like that. I usually don't center the second hand anymore. I don't care enough. And most of my watches I wear are dress watches. So I usually set mine within 30 seconds to a minute ahead of what the actual time is, because most of my watches run fast, not slow, and I don't want to be late. So I tend to do that. And because I own 18 watches, which sounds terrible when I say it like that, I don't rotate through all 18 regularly. Some of them are watches I just have for the collection, like my Mr. Jones watches I don't wear on a regular basis. But because of my quantity of watches, I typically swap watches daily. So the accuracy matters even less to me than all of this topic we've been having and all of this grinding gears, conversation we've had from David's article with a blog to watch. In some ways, it's somewhat moot for me because I'm setting watches every day almost. I might go, other than like with a new watch, which I'll wear for a week, I might go 2 or 3 days on a single watch if I don't feel like getting another watch out. Or I'll grab my G-Shock, or I'll grab my Citizen, and use my quartz watches when I don't feel like setting a watch. That's what I usually do. But I rotate so aggressively that it's just it's not a real life factor for me. Trapfish says for him, accuracy is cool for a talking point when showcasing his watches, but not a must. I have too many watches to worry about accuracy. See, and I have to, practically speaking, it's such a non-issue for me, because I got so many. I like Scotty's point. He syncs his against the G-Shock multiband. I have done that before. I have synced mine against the G-Shock. It's just, my habits are pretty simple. When I get a watch out I get my watches out the night before I wear them is my general rule. And so I go to my computer because I'll set them here at this desk. And so I'll set the watch I'm going to wear on this desk. And so I just set it against the computer while I'm here. So it's just a functional just a functional, practical way I approach handling it. But anyway, that's all I really wanted to go over. So I just thought it was an interesting article, and I saw both sides of it, his side, and then a lot of the comments about, it's not the biggest deal in the world. They are mechanical. There are affordable ways to adjust them, and those are all true points. And we do have other affordable choices. Like if you don't like it, get a Casio F91, get a G-Shock, get one that syncs to the atomic clock. So there are other options, but I mean, it does in a way feel like with all our advances in technology, you would think we could automate the regulation and adjustment of the movement to a much better degree than we see on movements that are still put into new watches. And Swatch has proven it with the System 51. So I think everyone's right, and so maybe that means everyone's wrong, or maybe no one's wrong. We can end optimistically. Nobody's wrong. So anyway, that's it for this live stream. Again, I will plan to be back next Saturday at the usual time. Don't know what the topic will be. Again, as usual, might have a review video out on the Glasuta, need to say that right. Glasuta Original 60s model, but it probably won't be ready by Saturday. So we'll just have to see on all of that. Koji does ask, what's your most accurate watch, Dennis? Oh, I was going to say that's easy, but that's a matter of perspective. The most accurate watch based off its own technology is my The Citizen, with whatever the standard The Citizen movement is. That's the plus or minus 5 seconds per year quartz watch. That's my most accurate watch inherently in its own capability. If you're asking me what my most accurate watch is independent of that, I'd have to say my Casio G-Shock that does the radio sync, the multiband, because it syncs to the atomic clock. But the module in that watch is probably plus or minus, I'm going to guess 15 seconds per month. It's the syncing that masks its inaccuracy because it updates. And so it gets an update. So it's like my computer clock. My computer clock isn't inherently a special clock. It's only atomic because it's getting told what the atomic time is. So it cheats in a way, but it is technically more accurate than the Citizen is. And if you're asking what my most accurate mechanical watch is, I'm not positive. I have to put them back on the time graphers you know what? We got a little bit of time here. Let me see. I'm going to show you some sausage making here, but I'm looking for a spreadsheet of mine on what I do. So when I do reviews, I used to record the time grapher in my reviews, but I don't think my reviews do terrible. Like no one watches the reviews. I just do them because if I own the watch, I figure I should go ahead and do something. I do see Koji has said, I assume it's the Longa. You are not right. The Longa I sent the Longa back immediately. It was gaining a minute a day. Totally ridiculous. And that movement, whatever that old movement or whatever they use it's not great. It's just not great. Sorry. I wish it was. Yeah, I need to do a follow-up review on the Longa, and I'll talk about that. But I log my time grapher stuff when I do the into a spreadsheet because I'm that nerdy. So I have a time grapher results spreadsheet. I'm going to try and share it. Okay, there. Oh gosh, I'm gonna have to zoom on all this. All right, here you go. So this is what I do. This is for the review videos. So like my Moser Pioneer, I time graph all of these. I wind them up and I time graph them before I shoot the review video. So I guess we can just look real quick and you can see what they all were. So, all right, the Moser Pioneer, pretty good. Average of 1 second a day gain. So that one's winning. This is the watch I traded in to get this Geo 60s. I guess I could put myself in the corner here. There you go. So that one was 3 seconds a day. That's pretty good. My Baltic Aquascaf, so micro brand, just under 5 seconds a day. My Breguet, not great. Just outside of Kosk though, but not terrible. 7 seconds a day. My Tonda PF, so that's the newer one, 4 seconds a day. The Gift, here's another good one. The SRPK 17, that's the 50th anniversary Seiko, 1.2 seconds per day. So that one's very good. I did not regulate that one myself. That one was out of the box, that good. And that's a 4-hour movement. My Patek Gondolo, okay, maybe it's winning. It averages no offage but you can see all my data points of my pluses and minuses. So it was 0 seconds per day. Okay, I have way more. My Zenith Chronomaster Original, 1.7 seconds per day. The Longa, it was much better when it came back from service. This was not the pre-service reading. The pre-service reading was like 49 seconds a day. This plus it's 4 seconds a day. So it's within COSC now, but no, it's definitely not my best. I don't own this one anymore, but my Caliber 400 Oris, that was 5.2 seconds per day gain. The SRPH 57, that was my Pro Specs. That one wasn't great. That's another 4R movement. That was just under 10 seconds a day. My old Geo Panomatic Lunar was 5 seconds a day, almost. My Santos 100 was terrible. That was minus 8 seconds per day, almost. My Orient Cano, this, I believe, I don't remember this was before or after I regulated it. It was before. That was 13 seconds per day. Oh my gosh, I've owned so many watches, guys. You're going to see like my whole history here. IWC Portuguese, that was pretty good. It lost half a second a day. 1 second a day on the Omega Seamaster, but that was Meta certified, so that's not too surprising. My Rolex Explorer 2, I think this was after service, 3 seconds a day. Older movement. This was back when it was the COSC standard. My Stova that I used to own, the Flieger, that was 4 seconds a day. My Marathon, that was a mechanical GP Marathon field watch, 5 seconds per day. My Messina Labs after service repair, because the hands were slipping, though I don't know if the movement was inaccurate before that. That was 4.5 seconds per day gain. So you see a lot of consistency here. My Zodiac Super Seawolf I used to have was 4 seconds a day. The mechanical Ricochet Mr. Jones watch, that's 4 seconds per day. The Vostok, this was before I regulated it, 10 seconds per day gain. Oh no, that was after I regulated. I got it to 10. I have a pre-regulation tab. It was 23 before I did it. Okay, I logged both. Rotary brand, British brand. I had a Super 7 dive watch. That was plus 1 second per day. All right, that's everything. There you go. And that's my whole ownership history. That doesn't include the quartz watches. So you now know. I mean, all these are in videos, but anyway, that's so yeah. So overall, my best one is my Patek, the Gondolo. So it averaged at 0. It's the only one that actually averaged at 0 of all the ones I've ever owned. But I've had a lot that are well within the COSC. So it's like the Moser and stuff, and the Omega were very, very, very impressive. So Koji notes the Moser was impressive. Hannibal says also agrees about the Moser. David says, one of my most accurate watches, if not the most accurate, is the Christopher Ward 12 with a non-COSC SW200 movement. I felt similar with the Stova Type B that I showed you guys here. So 4 seconds per day gain, that's obviously well within COSC. And you look and you see that's with the 12 up and the 9 up position were both outside of COSC, but the average overall. And this was a movement that was like they worked on it. I think it was the middle grade, so it was just outside. You know what? I didn't see in my list that I'd have to. Oh, I bet I didn't have my time grapher at the time when I owned my Tudor 1926. I guess I didn't log it. Dang, that's too bad. My Tudor 1926. It uses Tudor in the 1926 line used an Bosch movement, so they slightly modify a movement. I think mine was an ETA, but I never opened it up. But they use a Salida now. It was within COSC, but it was the grade below. But I think they make them in COSC. They just don't send them off for certification to save money. But anyway, so good to hear about the 12, David. And thank you for being a club member, by the way. David says, my Patek, my Geo Senate Perpetual, and my Ulysse Nardon Perpetual round my list of my most accurate watches, which, given the price points on a lot of those, would make sense. It's nice to hear, though, that the perpetuals are doing really well when I think about all the complications. And I often wonder if the complications are going to sabotage a lot of accuracy because of what they do to the mainspring. But sometimes they're driven by, they charge them up in certain ways to save on that. As I noted with my my spreadsheet, my Zenith Chronomaster Original, despite it's a 5 hertz movement and it's got to power that chronograph when it's on. I logged the timer when the chronograph wasn't running, because with all the additional ticking, I don't think the time grapher was going to be very happy. But even the accuracy was, you could tell what position was like the non-regulated position for sure, because the 6 o'clock position being a loss of 11 seconds per day was not good. But the overall average being under 2 seconds per day, I think that's a pretty solid position. Hagfish asks, do you prefer Stova or Laco, Dennis? Also, thanks for that Seiko movements explanation. Sure, no problem. Those are just my guesses, of course. I don't know. Seiko didn't tell me nothing. Do I prefer Stova or Laco? I've not owned Laco, so I can't really say. I can't really say. That's the reason why. Let me explain it a different way, because I'm not saying anything properly right now. The reason why I ended up with Stova over Laco was, at the time, the lug design difference. Laco still had the very traditional Flieger with the straight across lugs, and Stova had modernized the case, and they had rounded the lugs. Now Laco now has a model where they have those rounded lugs to better hug the wrist, but kind of like this, like the Senator here. If I can get it angled, you can see how the lugs curve downwards to kind of hug the wrist. I find that more comfortable than straight across lugs that are just really aggressive, but those were simpler to machine back in the day. Laco was thus more authentic in their case shape. Stova, I felt, looking at it, was going to be more comfortable. And based off of that, I went ahead and bought the Stova, and one of their Christmas, they do an advent calendar sale every year. So they had one marked down. It was a display model, basically. So that's what I did. And so that's why I ended up with a Stova, because the Lacos are a lot easier to get in the US. So had I been more impatient, I probably would have gone ahead and got the Laco. But Laco also will let you, if you want to save a lot of money, they'll let you go ahead and get one without a Swiss movement. You can save quite a bit of money that way. And you'll still have all the design and stuff. Like, they have a lot more choice than Stova. Stova does have a lot of choice. If you want original manufacturing Fliegers, your top choices are going to be Laco and then Stova in terms of variety. And then, of course, IWC if you want an expensive one, or Vempe. Vempe is mostly known as a brand that sells watches, but they do still make some, and they still make a Flieger last I looked. And that's it, right, of the original 5. A Lange & Söhne is the other 5th, and they don't do Fliegers, so not anymore. So anyway, that's sort of my explanation there. So I don't have anything against Laco inherently. Just at the time, it was a case design decision that drove my choice. And Hannibal asks, how do you feel about what Oris is doing lately? They seem to be hitting on all cylinders. I've liked a lot of Oris's moves, not all of them. I think the idea of going full Muppet is, like, the Kermit was at least playfully interesting. The Miss Piggy, I think, was more of a miss. No pun intended. The Caliber 400 angle that they're doing is I think, excellent. And here's what I like about what they do with the Caliber 400. And having owned a Caliber 400, again, it's sort of nice now, actually. Maybe I should always load the spreadsheet up, because it's kind of nice having them. Again, it wasn't my most accurate movement, but it was still within COSC. It wasn't said to be a COSC movement, but you can see mine was slightly over 5 seconds a day. And in all positions, you see, I had one that was 9. The 3 o'clock position being up on the time grapher was my only one that was out of COSC. Everything else was like right around that 6, that -4 to +6 level. My only frustration with the Caliber 400, and just if you've never owned one, just be aware of it. If it's dead, because it's like a double barrel system, it takes a lot of winding before it will kick on. So don't think your watch is broken if you feel like you've done like 15 turns and it's not kicked on yet. That it's normal for a Caliber 400. But anyway, back to your question, Hannibal, about what Oris is doing. I like that the Caliber 400 is given a 10-year warranty. That's a Rolex level warranty on let me rephrase, not the warranty, the service interval, a 10-year advertised service interval. And the only other brand I know that does that is Rolex. And I just think that's really cool, especially when you consider that Omega, which has the coaxial movement, which one of the big things about the coaxial movement that's so impressive is that it reduces wear because of how the whole pallet system works. But they don't even do a 10-year service interval recommendation. They're still shorter than that. So that Oris was like, you know what? We're going to put our money and our technology where our mouth is, and we're going to match Rolex and say, you don't need to send this watch in for a decade. That's some respect for their own movement, and I really like that. I also like that Oris, unlike what we've seen with Tudor, has still fully embraced doing third-party movement stuff, like having Solitas and having a line that is much more affordable, and still pushing out new watches using those movements, not just maintaining their old catalog. So I also like that they're doing that. because it's a big dice throw if you're going to move up market and say we're abandoning the old market. And Tudor was already up market, but they're clearly interested in discontinuing pretty much all of their eBosch movements. I think it's just a matter of time before they in-house the 1926. I think the reason they don't is simply because some of the smaller ones are too small to use their in-house movement. But I seeing that sort of thing. Christopher Ward does this too. We still see them come out with new versions of their affordable watches, not just coming out with the 12 and the Belcanto and the expensive stuff. I expect them to put more effort into the expensive stuff because that's where the margins are. But Oris is playing in both ponds, and I think it's working for them pretty well. I think it's working for me in my interpretation of them. The biggest problem with Oris is they still produce too many watches. Their watches hit gray market. Anything I want Oris, I would never buy new. I would always wait for gray at the very least because I know everything they do other than the limited editions will hit gray. And so that suggests that they're building too many watches and they're having to still offer a lot of discounts. But I really respect the brand quite a bit. So Hagfish did note that Tudor also offers 10 years. I did not know that. Thank you for mentioning that. I have owned Tudors, but I had a 1926 and I did have an in-house Tudor Black Bay bronze. Apparently I didn't have, I may have had that in the spreadsheet, but I let the latter go because it was too big, and I let the former go because I had other watches meeting the 1926's purpose. But no one asked why I let go of particular watches. Hagfish says, I see. I have a Laco, but I don't think I'm going to get a second one. Anyway, 2025 is their 100 years. Laco is giving away some Miyoto-equipped watches for those interested. Yeah, I've seen a few of those items. I think it's pretty interesting. All right. And Hannibal also mentioned the Tudor Kinesi movement. Yeah, and again, Tudor also, like, there's some movement tech sharing, like their chronographs are using some Breitling B01 stuff, and so, but Tudor has a movement developed, and that may be the Kinesi. I get them all mixed. I don't know the Tudor movements well enough. The stuff that's not Etta Solita is maybe a better way to describe it, because they're doing collaborations with movements and working with other partners on what they're doing. And they're not using Rolex's movements because that's always been a delineating factor between the two companies. So anyway, but I find it interesting. So, okay. Well, we've got an hour. Well, thank you for all the questions. I thought about doing it. I don't know if you guys think just a Q&A live, if that works for you guys or not. I've done Q&A videos where I take questions and I do a pre-recorded, kind of like what Federico does over on Federico Talks Watches. They don't get a lot of views, but sometimes it's just kind of fun to think about questions you guys come up with instead of me trying to brainstorm stuff. I am very lazy fundamentally, so we have to factor that in. But anyway, feel free to comment on what you guys want to see, but otherwise I'll come up with something for next Saturday, but I don't know what it'll be yet. But anyway, I've got other stuff to do and you guys probably have other stuff to do. So I'm going to say, have a really good weekend. And thanks for tuning in, those who saw it live and those who watched the recording. I hope you enjoyed it. Take care, everybody.